On this side, including the matchstick, is everything, all the parts that you use. And over here are the tools. I have a painted and an unpainted version here, so you can kind of see a little bit what things are made of and kind of what they look like or might look like when you're done. Now, my paint job is just done with dollar store paints with cheap brushes mostly. So I just kind of want to go through the parts that are used. Now this is a cereal box. You want to sand the glossy side, not off, but just so it makes it a bit easier to glue to. And we have a wooden matchstick. Now there's ones that are much thicker than this. This is only a little bit larger than an average bamboo barbecue skewer for shish kebab or whatnot. You're also going to need 6 flat toothpicks and a round toothpick. This is some Christmas ribbon. The important thing though is that it's mesh, so it's not solid ribbon. It's kind of well, it's mesh. Now there's some parts are kind of a choice between two items that you might want to use. You can use 21 11mm buttons, and it kind of makes a more accurate looking suspension. But you can also use rocket candy for the same job, and you only need half the amount. So you only end up needing 10 rocket candies, although it takes about 15 to get 10 good ones. But you will need one 11mm button anyways for the commander's cupola. So the 20 go into the suspension, and 1 is for the commander's cupola here. So you will need one anyways. And that's a choice between the parts. These take quite a bit more effort to install. These are a lot easier, and rockets are easy to come by and very cheap. There's a couple other options or options. There's 2 options for the headlight. You can either use a 2.5mm Google Eye, or you can use a clear gem sticker. So you can see that I've used a clear gem sticker for the headlight. They are quite a bit easier to use, and in my opinion look better than the Google Eyes. Traditionally I've always used Google Eyes. I just recently discovered these. So you can use either one. They're both fine. I like the way the gem stickers look better. But it's optional which one you want to use, which one you have access to. These gem stickers can be a little bit harder to find, and then Google Eyes are pretty common. Here's another option you can see with the painted model. I've got these are much more rounded and low than these ones on here. So this is more accurate. And these are enamel dot stickers, the smallest kind. The problem being that they're harder to find, and you get less of them for your money than you get at these 5mm Google Eyes, which is the option I have on here. Again, traditionally I've always used these. I only recently came across these enamel dot stickers, which look better to me and more accurate as to what it looked like historically. But like I said, you get less of them, they're harder to find, so these are options here. You're going to need some 8 to 9mm buttons. And these are soft snowflakes. It doesn't really matter if they're hard or soft or what the material is so much. As long you're just making detailing for the rear drive wheel. So there's also the fuel tanks are semi-optional. I recommend them. They do add quite a bit to making it look like a T-34 did. So you're gonna need 2 12-ring caps regardless for the front axle and roller there. But I recommend having 8 so you can make these fuel tanks as well. So you need 6 for the fuel tanks and 2 for the front. You're going to need 4 of these 8-ring caps, which are quite a bit smaller, so it's a completely different thing. You can't intermingle, or it's not a choice which one to use. They're quite different. And they're used in the rear wheels, with the rear wheels and these exhaust things. You're also going to need 12 of these gem stickers, which are used for the headlight, although you can use colored ones for the suspension. Or you can just, there's other things you can use. I just find these look really good. You can also cut like a plastic army man armature up real thin. It's just for the detailing of the center of the wheels. Let's see, anything else? There's 5.5 millimeter. I guess actually for the T-34, 5 millimeters would do, but make it a generous 5 millimeter sphere of modeling clay or plasticine. You'll need a little bit of cue card paper or index card paper, just heavy gauge paper, slightly thicker than regular paper. And you'll need some tracing paper, so very thin gauge paper. You don't need very much tracing paper. Probably 1/10 of a sheet would be more than enough. And you're also going to need about 21 centimeters and the full width of a piece of drywall tape, which looks like this when it's unrolled. A drywall fiber tape, not the solid stuff. So those are all of the parts that go into making one T-34. 85. You will need one more of these 8-ring caps, actually, for the T-34 85. So make that 5 rather than 4, because I forgot about this piece on there, which is an additional one. So I will just add that to the lineup there. So it's 5 of the 8-ring caps rather than 4. Okay, so for tools, I highly recommend Weldbond glue. Except for when you're doing plastic to plastic gluing, it is the best that I've found to do all of your other kinds of bonds. So plastic to wood, plastic to paper, cardboard pieces, everything else, pretty much Weldbond. Highly recommend that kind of glue. For plastic to plastic, crazy glue, super glue, or modeling glue are all acceptable. Modeling glue, you have a little bit more time to make your decisions, but you also have to hold the pieces together for a little bit longer, so it's a give and take on that. I think it makes a bit of a stronger bond than just like dollar store super glue. I've got some dollar store craft paints. Now these are just $1 a bottle, and they're cheap, but they work fine. They're just acrylic paints, black, green, white, and silver. Now, if your green is too bright for tanks, like you say, if you've got a Christmas green or forest green, it might be too heavy of a color to look accurate to you. You can always dull them down to a more olive by adding a little bit of black and a whole bunch of white, a little bit of black and a whole bunch of white until you're happy with the color. So it doesn't really matter the tone of green. You can modify it until you're happy with it. I've got a little bit of, well, I've got a bottle of nail polish here. It doesn't matter the color or the style. You just want to, it's just used to harden the modeling clay. And it works quite a bit better and quicker than just covering it with multiple layers of glue. So it's just a slightly better way to harden that particular part. So you don't need much of it, and generally you'll buy one bottle of nail polish, and that will do all your models for a long, long time. I don't want to say forever, because who knows how many you'll build, but I've only, I think, ever bought one bottle of nail polish. You're going to need either to own or have access to a 7mm hole punch. You use it quite a bit with the T-34, so it's better to actually have one. Although, as long as you have access, you can dip in the pond multiple times, so to speak. You may have to. You require a lot of hole punch discs, and actually the hole punch negative space slots like this. And if you're doing tow hooks, you need like moon parts where you clip them very close together. Move the piece of cardboard like a millimeter and clip again, and a millimeter and clip again to make the crescent moon pieces. So you need access to one of these quite a bit. You need a ruler, a small or large ruler. It doesn't really matter, although the small one is better for the initial stages. So I'd say small is the way to go. If all you have is either a large or small ruler, I would choose small. A couple of drill bits here. This 1/16 one. You can see the difference in their base. If you can get these, they're a bit more expensive, but in my opinion, it's worth it. It really saves your hands and makes drilling the holes quite a bit easier. If this is a 1/8 bit, if you can't find or you don't want to bother paying the extra money for the nice hand thing, then just wrap it the bottom in tape. It's not quite as good, but it will save your fingers a little bit. And this pen is mostly just used to set guide holes to make sure your drill bit doesn't leave where you're drilling, although I think they might be used for a couple other things, not very much. But anyways, a thumbtack is a good tool to have as well. You're going to need a few of these clothespins, mini clothespins. The colored ones seem to be a bit more durable, but they're all good. They do tend to fall apart every once in a while, so you will need. They're cheap though. You get like 50 for $1 or something like that, or at least I have been. So just buy a couple packs and then you'll be set. As they fall apart on you, you just toss them away. Needle nose pliers, they're not used for a whole lot, but they are useful. Scissors, you're going to need good, reliable, sharp scissors. A scraper blade. This is basically like it's used for scraping paint off windows or gum off floors and stuff like that by janitors. They're cheap and widely available. It's not a razor blade, but it is as sharp as a razor blade. It's just a one-sided scraper blade. Some tweezers, always helpful for doing tiny detailing. An X-Acto knife or a box cutter. You want one that's good enough. Like you can still probably get it at the dollar store, but make sure you get the more expensive version so your blade isn't wiggling around a whole lot, or you will find it annoying to try to use. A mechanical pencil of some kind. It's used for making a few marks. Variety of paintbrushes. This one is essentially only used in the very beginning. This one I use for almost everything else. This one is used for some of the more detailed gluing parts, but it's just a cheap brush. These all three are dollar store brushes. Try not to get them with especially the smaller ones, with plastic bristles. Those are essentially useless. And then this is an expensive modeling brush used to do some of the tiny detailing at the very end of the painting processes. You're going to need a couple of grits of sandpaper, a very fine sandpaper. I'm using 320. You could go a little bit rougher than that, but I don't recommend much rougher. And then a really rough, this is a 40 grit, for scouring the buttons and the glossy side of your cardboard and other things that need to be scoured quite a bit. So a couple of grades of sandpaper, and those are the tools